Previously, the group spent another week of downtime in Port Freehaven as they worked to get their ship back in usable shape. Sean spent several days scrying on Avery Rain and also sending her messages via sending in an attempt to find a way to convince her to end the contract on Sean's life. That came to an abrupt end when Praetors got involved, so instead Sean worked with the Saltborn Queen to hire their own assassins to kill Avery Rain. It would take a few weeks, though. Several of the group took the Kraken's Eye to the Wyvern's Claw, drawing lots of attention in the process. After some back and forth, they decided to turn it in for the rewards. Eventually, the week of downtime drew to a close, and the ship set out again. That first night, Yuri noticed the magical door that led to their villa open while on watch. A cloaked figure quietly slipped through, disappeared, reappeared behind him, put a knife to his throat, and modified his memory so that he didn't remember anything out of the ordinary. The assassin, because of course it was an assassin, then slipped down to Sean's room and killed her before she even had a chance to properly wake up. She then pushed Sean's body into the water. Keelan heard the splash, but it took him a few seconds to realize that it was something important and not just a fish. He sent Saba to investigate, and upon realizing that it was Sean's dead body that he'd heard hitting the water, he opened his mouth to shout. Before he could say anything, though, he found a blade at his throat. Using one of his abilities to get away from the assassin and her blade, Keelan managed to sound the alarm. He sent Saba out to try to grab Sean's body and keep it from sinking further. The group started trying to fight the assassin, but the fight went very bad, very fast, when several of the group went unconscious, and Keelan was killed. The assassin told the remaining members of the group that she didn't want to kill them. She'd done what she came there to do, and they just had to let her walk away. Taria really didn't want to let her go, especially when she tried to take the ship's will with her. When it was all said and done, though, the assassin slipped back through the door. Tornak went flying out to try to find Sean's body before there was no time left to resurrect her. The Rizian rushed down to Sean's room to try and find the diamonds that she kept there, but the room had been ransacked and there were no signs of them. The assassins had clearly learned their lesson and had figured out that resurrection was an option for the group if they had diamonds on hand. Taria chased after the assassin. As she came through the door, she started shouting for Vitalia or anyone else to tell them what had happened. Then she continued chasing the assassin as she headed for the boundaries of the villa. The Rizian followed after Taria, more focused on finding a diamond. As he came through, he saw Vitalia unconscious on the floor, which was something that Taria had missed and got her back on her feet. Back on the ocean, Tornak kept racing towards Sean's body. Yuri started to follow. Taria managed to catch up to the assassin, telling her to give back what she'd stolen. The assassin handed over one of the diamonds that she'd taken from Sean's room and told Taria that it was for Keelan, as he hadn't been part of the contract. Taria kept pushing and was eventually able to get her to hand over everything she'd taken. But Taria was warned that if the group brought Sean back to life, then the next time the Twin Silvers would be after all of them. On the ocean, Tornak managed to get to Sean and started rushing back to the ship. He knew that he only had a few seconds to get the coins from Keelan and put them on her before Revivify was off the table, and if they didn't beat the clock, none of the rest of them had any ability to cast higher level magics than that spell. Armed with a diamond, Thalrizian rushed back to the ship and tried to bring Keelan back. While the spell took hold, though, Keelan's spirit refused to return. He was with his mother and the original Sava and the people he cared about who were long gone. He had no reason to come back. He'd done what he could do, and now it was time for him to be at peace. Keelan's spirit had a brief conversation with Thalrizian in the moments after the spell failed, asking him to keep an eye on the group as they needed guidance. Just as that was happening, Tornak managed to make it back to the ship with Sean's body. He all but shoved the coins on her eyes after grabbing them from Keelan's bag. To him, it looked like Revivify had failed, so he told Thalrizian that they needed to bring Sean back, and then she could try to bring Keelan back, because she had more powerful resurrection magic than the rest of them. Thalrizian then very bluntly told Tornak that Keelan hadn't wanted to come back. While Tornak was still reeling a bit from that, Thalrizian used the diamond that hadn't worked for Keelan on Sean instead. There was a long pause, and then her eyes shot open as she said, "Fuck." Then she turned to the side and saw Keelan's body beside her, which led to a much quieter fuck. And that is where we left off.